think so. Hello, is this on? Very good. We'll begin the Planning Committee meeting of Akron City Council. We have, I do believe there's 3 items that are up for public hearing today. And the process for these public hearings is that we will get a report. Yeah, there's 3. We'll get a report from the Planning Department on the conditional use request or the ordinance request. They'll provide a report. We will then open up the public hearing and ask for comment from the community, and then we'll repeat this evening. And this evening, after the public hearing, the committee will make a recommendation, either in favor, against, or to refer the item for next week. That's kind of like the process. However, before we begin that process, we have to ask everyone who's here that wishes to speak this afternoon to please stand up and be sworn in by a representative from our law department.
Okay, if you would please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Very good. The first item that is up for public hearing is an ordinance approving the 2018 Consolidated Action Plan, including applications and certifications for the Community Development Block Grant, the Home Investment Partnership, and the Emergency Solutions Grant programs, authorizing the Director of Planning and Urban Development to enter into all necessary contracts for the operation and the term of the programs. Oh, yes, just tell me.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair and committee members. The City of Akron's 2018 Consolidated Plan prioritizes our budget expenditures for Community Development Block Grant Funds, the Home Investment Partnership Program, and the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. The goals of the program are to assist in primarily low and moderate income persons, to improve existing housing conditions, to develop affordable housing, to expand economic opportunities, and to aid the homeless. The 2018 budget is proposed to be approximately $8 million. This includes $6 million in community development block grant funds, and it represents a 10% increase from our 2017 allocation. $1.5 million in home funds, and this represents a 38% increase from our 2017 allocation, and approximately $500,000 to assist the homeless in the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. ESG funds are equivalent to what we received in 2017. The plan makes recommendations for the following key initiatives: continuing Akron Housing Program in conjunction with the LED program to support revitalization efforts and historic preservation activities throughout the city, to continue the construction of new housing, public improvements, to support our local nonprofits. This includes the CDCs and the CHOTO organizations, continuing to support our minor home repair program, providing assistance to our local emergency and transitional shelters, and this also includes supporting homeless prevention and rapid rehousing dollars. We're also supporting the ongoing neighborhood partnership program and supporting the Great Streets program, which is a new initiative from the administration, and also other economic development related activity. The City Planning Commission approved this legislation on June 15th. The application is due on August 18th, and we would request passage by July 16th so we can submit the application sooner to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. At this point, we'll open it up for the public hearing, and we'll ask those that are in favor of the Consolidated Action Plan for 2018, if you could please come forward and provide for the committee your name and address.
Yes, my name is Joe Scalise. I live at 2708 Berkshire Circle in Akron. I'm also the Director of Housing Services for United Way of Summit County, and I'm here to talk particularly about the ESG and the home funds and the community block grant funds, and to make sure that council knows how important these funds are as we develop a system for dealing with homelessness in our community, both in supporting the local shelter system so that folks have a place to go in the short term, and supporting rapid rehousing programs which are designed to shorten those stays in shelter and get people back into their own residence here in the city of Akron as quickly as possible. We receive funding from those to provide rapid rehousing programs, and then we also receive some block grant funding, which is necessarily leveraged so that we can receive a homelessness management information grant to make sure that we're tracking the data, giving accurate reporting, analyzing what the data says, and making sure we're meeting unmet needs in our community. And so I just wanted to speak on behalf of both the United Way and as a board member of the Summit County Akron Barberton Continuum of Care that these necessary funds should be renewed.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the proposed plan?
Hi, my name is Lynn Budnick. I live at 3785 Fairway Park Drive in Copley. I also serve as the Executive Director of Access. Access is a homeless shelter for moms and kids. We've been in business for over 30 years, and we have been at capacity for those 30 years. I am here specifically because we are generously funded by the ESG program. It really helps us keep our doors open. Since we opened, we have had 20,000 homeless moms and kids go through our doors. Today, I have 45 moms and kids living with us today. But it's not just their basic needs. We give them that. We give them so much more. We give them training. We give them self-esteem classes. And 80% of our ladies find jobs. 85% go through programs like Joe spoke about and get housing. They don't just continue the cycle. We are fixing the problem. It's never going to go away, but we could not do it without this funding, and I really do appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the consolidated plan for 2018? Anyone else here wishing to speak in favor? Okay. Anyone? Not hearing anyone. Is there anyone wishing to speak against the plan? Consolidated plan. Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing portion and open it up to the committee members. Is there any questions from any of the committee members in reference to the 2018 Annual Consolidated Action Plan? Ms. Mobian?
I don't see the list of agencies. Were we provided that before, Ms. Tomek?
So this particular application does not specify agencies. This is a general recommendation of how we're going to utilize our federal funds. In terms of agencies, I don't know if you're talking about the homeless agencies or a different project.
All of them. We do have the list that we provided to last year, don't we?
So last year for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and later on today we'll talk about the emergency shelters, that's where we've identified, received for applications for those, so we'll review those a little bit later. But in terms of general recommendations as to the utilization of these funds, some of those have not been identified. Some of them, like the Housing Rehab Program, those are different contractors that work with homeowners to do a rehabilitation program.
Okay. But do you have the agencies identified from last year? Do you have that information available?
For some of the programs, yes. Where we go into contract agreements with those, we do have those, and I can provide those to you.
Could you supply
Sure.
those, please? I'm trying to remember. I know that Rapid Rehousing has been HM Life, and
They were, HM Life was part of the Rapid Rehousing Program about 2 years ago, and they've since moved those services to what is now United Way.
United Way.
Correct. It was Infoline, but it's now United Way.
So what is United Way doing?
They operate the same programs that Infoline did. Because of the transition from Infoline to United Way, they've undertaken all those programs, so they operate the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing program for us.
Could somebody help me understand what happened here?
If I may, essentially, Infoline merged with United Way. So Infoline, as a separate entity,
Are
no
they
longer...
under the auspices now of United Way?
They no longer, they are one and the same. So they are going through that formal process now. So United Way, for all intents and purposes, is Infoline. And so that came out, that information came out...
A couple months ago.
A couple months ago.
In the newspaper, I take it?
What's that?
In the Beacon Journal, I take it?
Yes.
So what happened? They're no longer independent source of information? They're part of United Way.
They are part of United Way. So there was a task force that was set up between the two entities, and I only know this because they asked for representation from the city and the county to be sort of neutral observers on that task force. Ultimately, the boards of both organizations made the determination that it was in InfoLine's best interest to merge with United Way.
You said we were observers?
We were.
Were we providing all these resources that are coming through us?
Well, I think that's why we were at the table. I was the person actually at the table.
At the table?
Yes.
Not as an observer, I hope, but as a participant.
We were. However, we really felt it was if whatever resolution was going to be reached needed to be reached by the boards of both of those nonprofits, not forced on them by any one entity like the city or the county. We certainly had opinions as we went through it, but we were invited to the table to help facilitate good conversation and ultimately the best course of action for the betterment of the services and both entities. And both boards felt at the end of the day that it was better for InfoLine from a standpoint of preserving and growing services to merge with United Way. And my understanding is that 211 and InfoLine services across the state are more often than not part of United Way organizations as opposed to a separate entity. So this is in effect almost aligning with what has been done across other counties in Ohio and in the Midwest. But I'm not a United Way expert, but that was my understanding going through the process. But ultimately it was the choice of both entities' nonprofit boards that decided to make the merger happen. And then of course the Continuum of Care Board had to make the decision on allocating the resources that you see before you, the recommendations you see before you.
This is interesting. I've only missed one meeting. Was this presented to the council somewhere?
No, again, it was really two independent nonprofits working together. We were there just to make sure that the community's interests were served, which I believe they were at the end of the day. We believe they were. But the public announcement was made several months ago that InfoLine was merging with United Way.
Well, I guess maybe it's my lack of being aware.
Sorry. My
But we have
apologies.
millions of dollars that flow through us that we are responsible for, I assume, by the federal government. And the council approves those, I guess. And no one thought it was necessary for us to be fully aware of this.
Well, there was no intent to not present relevant information to council. Again, two nonprofits were talking about a merger. They asked for the city and county, based upon their fiscal relationship, to be a party to those conversations. But ultimately, both the mayor and the county executive did not feel it was their place to force any particular outcome. The boards unanimously voted to do this. Ultimately, it was made public. We feel very confident in United Way's ability to carry forth the programs. Much of the InfoLine staff has been retained. The programs have been retained.
Mr. Hardy, I certainly don't disagree with the final decision. I do believe in streamlining wherever we can and merging wherever we can. That really makes sense. But I think all entities need to be aware when these things are happening. If in fact our vote means something, I mean, it looks like there are quite a few millions of dollars that the federal government is giving to us and we have to give approval. And I would think that someone would have felt the need to share what was happening here with us, other than the Beacon Journal. Now, I read the Beacon Journal as often as I can, and I certainly don't want to use that as my only source of reference and of information. But let me go back to my questions. If you could provide for us the agencies that we have provided these resources to in the last year, and I'm curious as to this first section, the clearance of land assembly and housing development. Has that always been a part of what we've been doing with these resources?
Correct. We have at instances where necessary acquired property and if necessary relocate the individuals that own that property and then demolish those structures.
That's always been a part of this?
Correct.
This information that we receive?
Correct.
The agencies will help me decide
Okay.
whether I vote for it or just abstain. we can talk about that later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I wanted to note is that on behalf of the lobbying of the administration and members of council, I know we were concerned that we were going to see a cut in CDBG funds, but we actually saw an increase. And so I just want to say it's important for us to be engaged in any way. It's important for us to network with our colleagues in other municipalities, because that works. I know there's been question about writing resolutions and sending stuff out if it really makes a difference. Here it made a 9.4% difference, almost $750,000 difference. So I did want to point that out. And at the same token, and I know folks are thinking of this, this brings to light, you know, a year and a half from now when we're going to be dealing with this census, because these dollars are based off of census dollars. So it's important for us to rally our community to work together to make sure that we make sure every individual is counted. That being said, I would like to have some time to look into this deeper. One of the questions I'd like to get some information on is who are we serving, and where and what areas of the community are they from? I know I hear from folks out in the community when it comes to housing that certain demographics are harder to get housed. I'm hearing from men that it's hard to get housed. And then it's also been a concern from me, are we hitting that population? And I don't know if these dollars track that, but I know at times they come in and I ask about those who age out of foster care. What type of housing, and are we hitting that population? Are they reflected in these numbers at all, anywhere where we could make sure that they're being served? So basically, who are we serving? What areas of the city are they coming from? So we could get an idea on that, please.
We can get that information for you.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Swirsky?
I noticed 525,000 for homeless shelters, correct? And another 150,000 for homeless prevention.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about what that is.
Sure. So the $525,000, the $500,000 is part of the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and we'll be submitting legislation shortly to discuss that in more detail. But those funds are for our emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, and homeless prevention dollars. The home funds is $150,000, and those are strictly limited to rapid rehousing dollars that we, it's rapid rehousing dollars. So what rapid rehousing means is if an individual or family experience a homeless episode, our nonprofits work with that family to get them housed in the private sector, and then we provide rent to them for anywhere between 9 and 12 months based on their need. An analysis is done on a monthly basis to determine how much rent assistance they need to get stabilized and to keep them out of the homeless population.
Yeah, I think it's great. Just heard a little bit of rhetoric about we haven't been helping the homeless, but it's good to see there are a lot of dollars flowing in that direction. I wanted to ask you also, community development organizations, do you have a list of the ones that you are going to provide funds to?
So I neglected to bring my budget with me. There's a line item in there for CDC's Community Development Corporations. We are going to issue a request for proposals for those in the next couple of weeks to provide financial assistance to our CDCs. So that'll come out in the next couple of weeks.
So what would be sort of a typical grant award?
It could be.
Is it a grant award, I guess?
It is a grant award, and that will certainly be up to the agencies themselves. It could be geared towards housing activities, or it could be geared towards some type of social services and/or some type of economic development assistance within the neighborhood business districts or the great streets.
And what would the range be per
We're looking at approximately up to $100,000 per CDC, depending on what they apply for.
Okay, just one more. The business incentives, could you explain what those are? Are they
That is
aimed at small businesses? Is it a complement to the Great Streets program?
It is a business assistance to small businesses, and it will be a complement to our Great Streets program.
Okay, so is there a policy about the size of the business, the locations, where we?
Yes. So we have 10 Great Streets districts that have geographic boundaries. We've been doing incredible amounts of outreach to the business and property owners, as well as some of the residents, but primarily the business and property owners getting ready for the CDBG budget and the announcement of some competitive grants. Our effort is to make a lot of these things are not new. It's just that they were never transparent and they were never easily navigable as a business. You didn't know when you should apply. There wasn't a routine cycle of applying, so you knew all of that. There's definitely a gap that we found from the data that I shared with council from our business and property owner survey around needing that low interest or no interest loan or grant to buy a new hood on the stove, or fix the electrical, or do some things that are small, that a bank probably wouldn't fund, or that business owner couldn't fund based upon their business state. So the whole idea of the business incentive program is to really target those small businesses within our neighborhood business districts and provide them targeted support for when they need those sort of smaller dollar interventions.
Thank you.
Very good.
That's great.
Further questions from committee members, Ms. Amobian?
Just curious, the emergency funds have been coming to us for years now, and there are certain agencies that are currently receiving these and have been for years.
Correct.
And I know that no one promises anything from year to year, but we certainly have some of those organizations, I think, locked in to be continued, to receive continued funding of some sort, I would hope.
Correct, and our funds are also quote-unquote locked in. Prior to 2010, our Emergency Solutions Grant Program was about $300,000. And when Congress passed the HEART Act, they froze that $300,000 or in that ballpark as to what we can spend on our emergency shelters and transitional shelters. From that point forward, any dollar amount over that threshold must be used for rapid rehousing and homeless prevention activities. So that kind of limits what we can do for our emergency shelters.
Right. Now, the rapid rehousing in Summit County, we had designated, I think, 2 agencies at one time. Was it Salvation Army, HM Life?
Correct.
And
Correct.
that has moved to what now?
That has moved to what is now United Way.
So they have a separate, some different criteria they're using to identify those organizations now?
It's the same criteria. Same program, same criteria, except that Infoline, United Way is now running that program.
Okay. So are they going to honor the way that the money's been dispersed in the past?
Correct.
So they have some new
Correct.
ideas of...
The requirements that are set by HUD have not changed. So they still have to honor those requirements.
Okay. Okay. Because I remember when the funds became available, it was going to be short-term, and I thought it was going to go away. I know they've reduced them over the years, and they're trying to keep those individuals from becoming long-term homeless folks by hoping to
The
catch
original
them
amount that
before.
was, the original amount of funds that were allocated for, at that time it was called Homeless Prevention and HPRP, those funds have disappeared.
Okay.
So what we've had to do is kind of look at a Band-Aid approach and try to make sure that the same amount of money is entering into the community, but finding different funding sources to do that.
Is there anybody from United Way here? Oh, you now work for United Way. That's right. You work for Infoline, so now you're part of United Way. Now, do you have any idea what you're going to do with these funds, or how you're going to manage them, or do you have an agency in mind? Can you go to the mic, please? I can't quite hear you.
As pursuant, around the merger, we're going to continue to operate these programs the same way that Infoline has operated these programs, which are trying to maximize the number of people we can get out of the shelter. Anybody taking advantage of rapid rehousing has to be either in the shelter or living outside, verified in a place unfit for habitable condition. So at Infoline, we operated the central intake where anybody that was homeless could call and be assessed. And so when Melody of Mary Housing, HM Life, and Salvation Army stopped wanting to do those supports for rapid rehousing, we jumped in and did them because we could shorten the time between someone calling on the phone looking for help in the assessment and the time we could interact with them quickly instead of having to make a referral. So beginning in late 2015, Infoline started doing rapid rehousing and homeless prevention, and we've been doing it ever since. And those are the programs that have been merged with United Way. They brought over all our personnel. We lost no personnel, and then we're bound to run the programs the same way that they were funded before. So our hope is to become even more efficient and be able to help more people.
Yeah. So the information that Mr. Neal is requesting, you're going to supply that? Is that what?
I'm sure that
what's
they will
gonna
be
happen?
asking us for information on that
Yeah.
from HMI.
And we're not asking for names, we're asking for individuals where it could be Tom, John, John Doe, it doesn't matter what area that person came from, that kind of thing.
We can tell what their last permanent zip code given to HMIS when we did the interview with them.
Okay.
We'll be able to tell age range and things like that.
So you'll be able to tell us how they, okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Swirsky?
Yeah, just a couple more explanations. Neighborhood revitalization and sustainability and public improvements. Give us some examples of those.
So
Explain
that is
those.
basically our housing rehabilitation program run through Department of Neighborhood Assistance, where we partner with our rehabilitation staff in the lead program and offer assistance to rehab houses throughout the city.
It's primarily housing.
Primarily housing, correct.
And public improvements?
Public improvements are basically physical infrastructure improvements. Those dollars are going to be targeted in our Great Streets program for 2018.
Helen, if you could, maybe, so everyone understands here, this is just a plan?
Correct.
And the different components of it, we will
Yes.
see legislation
Correct.
coming in on
Yes.
each and every component,
Correct.
and this is the overall plan itself, the Consolidated Action Plan, which has a number of components. Each component will have legislation.
And we still
separate.
have, this is authorization to submit an application to HUD. They still have to review it. They still have to provide our grant agreements to us.
Exactly. Thank you. Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Helen, so we're going to have $15,000 earmarked for homeless prevention. Is that what this is?
I think it's 150,000.
15,000 for homeless prevention?
150,000.
150.
Oh,
If it says
150,
15,
okay.
then that's a typing error.
Missed
It's
a zero then.
150,000,
Okay, so,
sorry.
I guess, let me just say this. I know we're going to get the names of the agencies, but I know Haven Arrest. What else, what other homeless shelters do we have in the city? I mean, any big ones?
So
I
you,
mean, Salvation Army, I guess, takes some people.
Salvation Army has actually closed down their shelter.
Oh, did they?
They
Okay.
closed down last year.
Who else do we use?
So we have Access Emergency Shelter, and they also provide emergency housing.
Where are they?
They're on
West Market.
next to Akron Family Restaurant.
West Market?
West
Okay.
Market, yeah. Battered Women's Shelter,
Which
Family
one?
Prom.
I can't hear you.
Battered Women's Shelter,
What is it?
Battered Women's Shelter.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Family Promise,
Okay.
Shelter Care, Legacy Village, OMCDC, Ohio Multi-Development Corporation, Community
Okay.
Health Center,
Yeah.
North Coast Community Homes, trying to run a mental list of our continuum of care providers as
Yeah.
well as HM Life Opportunity Services. We probably have about 12 to 15 providers.
That's good. And I'm sure they do a lot of good work. I'm a little concerned about, we all know about homeless people that are living at Second Chance Village, and I've been down there, talked to some of the folks who live in there, and they don't like to go to the homeless shelters. And what they say, well, there's predators there, especially, I think they're talking mostly about the one on East Market Street here, Haven Arrest. Now, that's, whether this is true or not, this is their perception, and that's the problem. That's why they're living in the woods or living at a place like Second Chance Village. So have we taken into consideration, I mean, they've been down there talked to us, some of the council people have gone and talked to them. Has anybody in the administration taken into consideration some of their feelings when we put this together?
I can address some of that. One thing that we have been doing is we're part of that continuum of care for the homeless that was mentioned, and we've been working with the other members in terms of looking at availability of beds. There actually are beds available in the community, quite a few, for anyone who is unsheltered that wants to avail themselves of that, and they are working with Mr. Lewis and Second Chance Village in terms of looking at options for those residents. So I think that's an ongoing conversation. Every city in the United States has these same issues in terms of shelter and people's willingness to take advantage of it.
I just think with this coming up, and Mr. Lewis, I talked to him a number of times, not just down here, but his, and I know you have too, Jason, but he said, like, he wants to start a conversation about this problem. Now, the real problem is, you know, homelessness. We understand that's a national problem, but the problem with the people that are living there is they don't trust these shelters. And some of them, to be honest with you, don't like people tell them what to do all the time. So it's kind of like, it's run democratically. And so, I mean, I'm just wondering if can we give Mr. Lewis some money out of this to take care of the clients he has? Has that been considered or anything? Did he ask for anything? I don't know.
I can't, I'm not going to answer for the administration on this. I'm just kind of glad we're having this conversation today, because I have to tell you, whenever this does come to council,
I know, that's
the condition, that this is not the discussion to have at that time.
Okay.
In terms of, you know, that, but making that request, Mr. Kilby absolutely can make that request to the administration.
We haven't gotten a request to that effect, but...
Okay, very good.
All right, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Kilby?
I mean, one last question. Okay, now, this is just a plan. Now, if he did say, hey, could I get some money to feed some of these people, would we consider that out of this fund?
I mean, when you're talking about the shelter, I mean, as you're all aware, we have, you know, a conditional use coming before council for that. What is being done there is not legal under the zoning code. We'll work through that issue, but I think, as I mentioned before, that continuum of care, it exists to look at innovative models for helping with homelessness in a variety of ways, and I think that group can continue to look at that, and the city will be engaged with that group.
Thank you.
There are so many organizations that are out there, and there's so many different pots of money, and there's so many different programs. I mean, there's just a number coming from the federal, from the state, and from the county side that we know of that's governmental, if you will, and then aside from that is the nonprofit piece. Ms. Tomic, do you have like an idea of what the number would be in terms of the funds that come through, including, which we don't really address ourselves, the continuum of care. But what is that? And for the city of Akron specifically, not the county, but...
So the city of Akron applies for and receives approximately $1 million of federal, state, and county funds that we then subcontract out to our partners. In addition to that, there's about $4.8 million that the city of Akron is a part of the Continuum of Care Consortium to provide, apply for and receive another $4.8 million of funds. So that's a total of about $5.8 million that we are a part of. The agencies themselves apply for independently other funding sources, and we don't have that data in terms of how much other money comes into the agencies themselves.
And oftentimes, as we had heard, that these funds are used to leverage others. So that 5.8 is the beginning. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Correct. Yeah.
Anything else?
Pardon me?
Anything else?
Yeah, I did want to just to address Mr. Kilby's question in regards to legislation that was passed by Congress in the utilization of emergency shelter grant funds. That legislation specifically states that ESG monies are supposed to be used for individuals and family who lacked fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residences. And they also specify that the money is to be used to get folks out of different housing situations, including campground. So we can't use these funds to facilitate sites like a camping
What
facility.
about supplying food in the meantime while they're trying to get out of there?
Well, that part, we can look at that. Yeah, we can look at that part of it, yes. But it wouldn't be at that facility. We have not provided any resources to any soup kitchens in the community with these funds, but we can look at that.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Very good. If not, we'll now move on to item number 2, which we have a public hearing authorizing a conditional use to construct a single-family detached allotment on the northwest side of Diagonal and south of Copley.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, the city is the owner of this approximately 6.6 acres of vacant land. The city recently posted a request for proposals seeking residential development of this land. Nez Homes, Inc. submitted the chosen proposal. The crossings at Old Farm would provide 51 new house sites in a dense, attractive development. Conditional use approval is needed due to lot sizes being smaller than the minimum single-family lot, most ranging around 46 to 56 feet in width and 67 to 85 feet in length. The public right-of-way would be 40 feet in width, including 24-foot wide streets, 3-foot sidewalk on the outer side of the loop drive, and public water and sewer services. Privately maintained stormwater management area would be located at the northeast corner of the development. The developer has partnered with K. Hovnanian Homes to provide quality, attractive homes to purchasers of the lot. Home plans will include 1.5 and 2-story houses ranging in size from 1,200 to 2,600 square feet of area. The larger homes will be reserved for the larger lots. Developer states the home sites have been designed to maximize density to help create this traditional urban infill community that young buyers are seeking. A variety of exterior colors will be available to give the community an attractive aesthetic that will blend seamlessly with the traditional Akron neighborhoods. The city and the developer would enter into a development agreement. The developer would purchase the property for an agreed-upon price of $155,000, and the city would receive an additional $1,000 for each lot sold. The final purchase price is estimated to be $206,000. This proposed development represents a significant opportunity to create new, high-quality housing within Central City and is in accordance with the city's new housing strategy established last year to increase the population of Akron. The city's new tax abatement program should be an added stimulus to promote the sale of these homes. The proposed 51 dwelling units on 6.6 acres represents a density of 7.72 dwelling units per acre, under the recommended 10 to 15 dwelling units per acre of the Land Use and Development Guide Plan. And both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval, subject to the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. At this time, we'll open it up for public hearing. Is there anyone here sorry, Mr. Hardy. Have some comments?
I don't know if yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We in the integrated development staff just wanted to take a moment to thought it might be good, considering this is one of, if not the largest, and probably the quickest to go to market single-family market rate new housing developments that we've seen in the city in this century. And we wanted to kind of take an opportunity, if I may, to provide some comments at a 30,000-foot level as to why Old Farms isn't just important because it's a great development, but because of what it means to the city, and also what partners like Nez Homes really mean for the momentum of the city. So the crossings at Old Farms, which Abe, Jason, others, Bill will present here shortly, present, as Mike said, an incredible opportunity to support one of the largest new housing developments in the city of Akron in this century. And for Ward 3, it's one of the largest, if not the largest, single-family market rate housing developments in decades. One of Mayor Horrigan's most well-known strategies is to grow our population. Akron's infrastructure, as we all know, was built for 300,000 residents. We currently sit just below 200,000, although we are growing. I don't know if anybody saw the census update, but we are growing. Why is this goal of putting Akron on track to house 250,000 people by 2050 important? Because building our population can have a dramatic effect on our city's tax base, our labor market, not to mention the residual impact of new residents on small retail businesses, increasing those businesses' bottom lines and creating jobs. More residents mean more ratepayers to equitably share in the infrastructure maintenance of our city, more prospective students for our schools and universities, and overall more stable neighborhoods. The mayor released our Planning to Grow Akron report in February of last year, and this council has supported the implementation of many of those recommendations from that report, including the residential tax abatement program. The crossings at Auld Farms and many other market rate housing developments in our pipeline, as the Akron Beacon Journal noted this weekend, are the direct result of that support, and we thank you. Bottom line, we need new housing in Akron. You can't live here or stay here if you don't have a marketable house to buy. New housing makes existing housing more valuable. In every single meeting I've attended since coming to work for the city, protecting property values is the #1 concern, regardless of the topic of discussion. New single-family market rate housing, time and time again, has been shown in many other cities to be the single greatest driver of preservation of existing home values and increasing the marketability of neighborhoods over time. And as we all know, for Akronites at every level of the socioeconomic ladder, a home is often the single greatest asset and source of wealth for a family. When we did our reinvestment fund report that is publicly available, even in our most poorest neighborhood, we have over 35% home ownership, meaning there are people in Akron who own $3,000 homes, but they didn't buy them when they were $3,000. Bringing these neighborhood home values up not only helps those individuals, but helps the families and the wealth that can then be passed on. At this moment in time, our administration has roughly 1,000 new housing units in some form of development to bring to this council. By way of comparison, in all of 2017, we had 15 residential building permits total. 15 for the entire year. We have 1,000 in development right now as a result of your partnership. To put this into further perspective, since 2013, we have averaged over 300 residential demolitions a year, hitting a high point in 2015 with 381 demolitions. We have a lot of catching up to do. New housing like Auld Farms creates the most critical aspect of any housing market, choice. People shouldn't have to move to the suburbs to find a new house. We should have choice in our Akron markets. Some folks want to rent, some want to buy. And of those who want to buy, many are opting for more denser, less lawn to maintain type of developments, new urbanism designs. If we want residents to stay and new residents to move back, we need choice in our markets. Yes, that will mean some density. Yes, that may mean rentals and for-sale products alike. And yes, that also means rehabbed historic neighborhoods as well. Different people want different things. Here's another statistic to keep in mind as we talk about today's development and about building new and different housing options within the city. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 36% of the total American workforce are considered freelance, meaning they work from anywhere on a contract basis. By 2027, that number is projected to cross the 50% mark, meaning that half of all U.S. workers are literally going to work from their homes or their neighborhood coffee shops. If Akron is going to thrive in the 21st century, both economically and socially, in an economy driven by knowledge and technology, we need lots of vibrant housing options within the city. That doesn't mean that we don't recognize that new and different housing means change, and change is hard. Changes within our neighborhoods, changes in demographics. And with those challenges, though, can be incredible opportunities to regenerate our neighborhoods. Cities, I believe, are not unlike living ecosystems. We have to adapt and change in order to thrive. We are confident, the administration, the mayor, that Auld Farms is a great sign that this adaptation is taking place in our city. We've worked closely with NES on this project through the capital stack, administrative reviews, site and street designs. Everyone at the administration, top to bottom, has taken a look at this. We are fully supportive of this project. And Mayor, I don't know if you wanted to add any thoughts.
Just a couple. I know we've had this conversation before, and I've heard many of you speak about, just sometimes the concentration downtown, and nobody's looking at neighborhoods. This is, with great streets and with this is a significant impact into a neighborhood that has not seen development in a long time, and this is market rate development too. And I've said this numerous times in a lot of different public places about, we have customers to serve, and we need to ask our customers just what do they want. We didn't do just one housing study. We didn't do just two. We did three. We did three that gave us the data that people said, we want new housing in the city. We want to have some of these options. It's not pushing people out. We're not buying a bunch of homes and tearing them down. We did that. We have vast swaths of land that are available and open to be able to do it. This is a small tract to be able to do and give the customer actually what they want. So with that, and we're more than happy to try to entertain some questions, but this is, like I said, a data-driven, a customer approach to saying, what do people want? This is what they're demanding.
Thank you, Mayor Horrigan. Okay. We'll now open it up for the public hearing portion. If there's someone here wishing to speak in favor, you can please provide for the committee your name and address.
My name is Bill Sanderson, 7555 Friedel Drive, Concord, Ohio. And I want to thank the chairman and members, Mr. Mayor and staff, for the opportunity to present for you. I was hoping I didn't have to. Yeah. So as has been pointed out, a little bit about Knez Homes. We are a locally owned builder and developer. We at one time were the largest developer in Lake County, and 5 years ago, most of our work was in Lake County. Now, most of our work is in the city of Cleveland and entering suburbs. And there's a reason for that. You can either keep driving and sprawling and going in that direction, or you can begin to move your population back towards the city where all the fun stuff is. And what we're finding is the newer buyers, some, but not all, are choosing to move back towards the city because they want to take advantage of all the things that living in a rich urban environment provides. And Akron, like Cleveland, has a lot of legacy assets and some new assets that you've built, like the baseball stadium and other things that, people, they want access to that, and they want to be close by instead of driving on endless hours on the freeway. So the community is going to be called the Crossings at Auld Farm, and I think the Crossings is a good term because we're trying to cross over a little bit of a bridge, and the bridge is buyers that might consider one of the nearby or even far-flung suburbs who would take a look and say, gee, I don't have to drive. I'm close to I work at the hospital. I've got the 15-year tax abatement. There's a home I like that I can afford. Why not? That's what this is all about. So I think all of you by now are aware of the basic location. And yes, we will leave Auld Farm together, even though I know the road is two separate words. It's all right. So we responded to an RFP from the city, and it's the parcel is currently vacant. And again, it's on Diagonal Road, just by Auld Farm there. It's primarily surrounded by residential on the backside. Then there's a church and a single-family home that has a growing operation, and again, a big vacant area of property. As was indicated in Mike's presentation, this area was actually designed for significant density, and in fact, Saperstein Towers is right here, and you can see that this neighborhood is actually pretty dense. When we met with the city, and I do want to tell you, Mayor, everybody in all of the department heads and everybody that we've worked with city administration has been, very accommodating, not a rollover, but willing and able to work through the very significant issues that it takes to put a community like this together, and we do appreciate that cooperation. When we met with city planning, it was determined that even though this has the density to support a pretty dense townhome development, and we could probably put lots of townhouses there, that wasn't the kind of development that this neighborhood called for. We wanted to provide a detached single-family home. just like all the other single-family homes in the neighborhood. In order to do that and make the community economically viable, we have to shrink the lots down and maximize the infrastructure, which of course, as Mr. Hardy said, does help bring money in to support the system, because you're going to put the same amount of water and sewer and all that stuff in there. The more houses you have to split it by, the less expensive it is per unit. So that's what drove the decision to go with single-family homes on this particular site. I've given this a couple of times now, so if anybody wants to stop or slow down, that's great. I think everybody's pretty much aware of, it's just a long straight road, and Saperstein Towers is probably the most significant thing that you see. So as mentioned, in planning, there were some questions from neighbors that we responded to. This community slopes gently in this direction, and there were some questions about stormwater management, and there was some potential flooding in areas, and was it going to get better or worse? Typically what happens in an area like this is you put in enhanced stormwater management, which doesn't exist in any other neighborhood, so typically the challenges to the storm systems are improved rather than deteriorated, because now you have to build the system like it's 2018 and not 1918, when a lot of the stuff was built. We have some homes that front onto Diagonal Road. Our intent is to do this in 2 phases. Our building partner, K. Hovnanian Homes, is the 9th largest builder in the country. They do a lot of infill and other types of urban development, so suburban and urban. They have a great portfolio of homes that are very attractive, and we're going to put this in 2 phases because they're anxious to close on the first lot, start a model, build a couple of other homes. They feel, and we feel, that there's great potential here, and partly, if you think about it, it's because of a supply and demand. As Mr. Hardy said, it's about choice. Well, if you want to buy a new home that has the features of a suburban style home, there is no choice right now. We're confident that this will provide that choice, and not everybody will take it. But there will be some people that live and want to stay in Akron that now will have an opportunity if they want something a little different than what they're living in. And hopefully people that have moved to the suburbs and have decided that they'd rather live closer to the city. And I know this for a fact because I'm that kind of person. I raised my family in the suburbs, and 6 years ago my wife and I bought a townhouse, and it's very dense and very crowded, and it's exciting every day. And so we're going to do this in 2 phases. The first phase is here, and while they're working on the model, we'll be doing the development work in the second phase. The stormwater pond will go in up front, and of course, as mentioned, the water, sewer, and all the utilities will be thoroughly reviewed by each of the departments to ensure that they are built to the agreed upon standards. There's a typical landscaping plan. So each home has some landscaping. There's an entry feature to identify where you come into the community, and then some plantings around the edge, and of course some more significant plantings around the stormwater management pond. So hopefully as you're driving by, it's attractive and has a look of a community, which is what we're all looking for. And I think one more. So these are just some of the many variations of the homes that K. Hovnanian intends to build. As you can see, they have a 2-car garage, which a lot of customers nowadays demand a 2-car garage. Some even want more, but we don't go in for that. Primarily 2-story or 1.5 stories. The thing that's different about a new home is the energy efficiency and the use of resources. You know, 20 years ago, we barely insulated our houses. Now they're so insulated that we actually have to put in a fan to bring outside air in, or else we'll all suffocate. The new products like vinyl windows, vinyl siding, composite roofing are way more durable and way more stay attractive longer with less maintenance. In the old days, people would take this 2-week summer vacation and paint their house. I don't know anybody that does that anymore, and I live in Lakewood, a city of lots of houses that need to be painted. So it's a very energy efficient home designed for the way home buyers want to live today. They can find this by driving, 4 miles in any direction. It's not like this is some magic thing that's never been built. It's being built right now. The choice is it can be built here in Akron, and we're excited to work with the city and our home building partner to try to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here, continue the public hearing, wishing to speak in favor of the proposed conditional use? The Diagonal Road and Copley Road, anyone else in favor? Anyone against? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anybody against? Okay, very good. Hearing none. Is there any questions or comments from any committee members at this time? Mr. Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Always good to have development take place. Just a couple quick questions. 50, it looks like 50-something, 51. What will be since with the tax abatement, what will be the tax base on those properties? Will it be the $4,000 or will it be higher?
Go ahead, Bill. So there's 2 step-ups. The first is we are purchasing the property from the city, so I assume at that time, some point in the very near future, the auditor will catch up with that sale. And then as the lots are built, they will transfer in the $30,000 range to the home builder, and so that will become the basis for those. So along with water, sewer, that stuff, you'll also have the tax base on 51 times 30,000 round numbers, which I think is important because the article in the Akron Beacon Journal this weekend did not distinguish the fact that most of what we build on vacant land that the city owns and is maintaining. So right now it's a negative. We hope to make that into a positive, and of course once the homes are built, those customers will also be shopping and doing all the other things that people move to the city to do. Thank you.
And this is the reason for my question. This is just so that from a planning standpoint. I don't know what it costs using a business model. You can make 1,000 widgets and sell them for $5, but if it costs, it's like penny. If it costs you more to make them than what you're getting from them, it's a challenge. So just from us, from a planning standpoint, as we grow, we'll understand what our average lot cost is. What does it cost for us to provide, I don't know if the word is ancillary services, or the services for a resident? For somebody to live in the city of Akron, be they own a home or not, what does it cost? Police, fire, service, if they have a child, school, what does it cost so that as we look down the line, and this isn't, for all of our projects, and as we think to grow our city, if these are based on most of our residents coming in being on tax abated properties, so that we can have an understanding as if we're at least breaking even, or are we a little bit above or a little bit?
Those vary by metro areas, and we've looked at a couple of those. I can get you some better figures about the tax cost to support one resident, whether they own a home, whether they just work here, whether they work and live and do all those other things. There's broken down into categories, but if you give me a little bit of time, I can get you some of those. And it's going to get you in the ballpark. It may not be exactly what the city of Akron is, maybe a metro area based on X number of population, but give me a little time and I'll get it for you.
Okay, that'd be helpful.
If I could just jump in, because this is a favorite pet peeve of mine. One of the things that people underestimate is how energy efficient, how resource efficient, meaning water, and how fire safe new homes are. So a comparison of an existing home and a comparison of a new home, when you take those into account, you're not going to be using as much water, you're not going to be having as much sewer, and fire safety is certainly enhanced, which means hopefully less requirement for the fire department to be involved. Now, as far as EMS and the police, that's, in each individual owner, but typically, people who purchase a home tend to have higher incomes, higher level of education, lots of things that there's a reason why they want to buy a home, and there's a reason why they can afford a new home. Right. So again, oftentimes it's less of a lag on services than a traditional house would be.
And I appreciate that. One more, Mr. Chairman. I'm just from the standpoint of forecasting. As we look to, we hit our goals, and if it's going to be based on that, being based on most of the people taking advantage of this opportunity on tax abated property, hopefully there'll be young families bringing in children. You know, what will that cost? They'll be driving on the streets, to be using all the different things. What will that cost be, and what will it take for us to average it out? Because right now, the city of Akron's median income is right around 34, 35. Hopefully that will creep up, but if it stays the same, or not because people are retiring, you know, drop some, what will we as a city be able to then, what's our tax cap to be able to provide all those services? And that's something we've asked before. It's a number that we need if we're going to do the thing of doing projections and putting out a 5-year plan to understand this is our tax base, this is our projected growth every year, but this is what we need to sustain that growth. And I know this isn't anything for you, but this is a good opportunity for us to start thinking that way, because I think you said 1,000 new?
We got 1,000 in the pipeline, units.
So hopefully that continues to grow, but again, the widget scenario, we're cranking these bad boys out, but are we going to be able to?
And if I could just address that quickly, I think another thing to keep in mind is the fact the city has lost over 90,000 residents in the last 60 years, and a lot of these services, they're being provided whether the people are here or not. One other thing I think to point out is the decline in the city has a real cost too. So the more vacant lots we mow, the more dilapidated houses we have to tear down. Those are all things that are going to come off the other side of the balance sheet as neighborhoods rebound. But it's good to be thinking proactively about the costs and the benefits.
I was just going to say the same thing, Councilman. I think it's a good thing to think about, and I'm glad Jason said that. The back of the napkin math for me is 90,000. We get 90,000 people back, then we should start worrying about our infrastructure costs, because right now, as we said before, our infrastructure, even our safety services to a certain extent, maybe outside of staffing, were built out for 300,000 or so people. We're at about 197 and change. So you're right to have us thinking about these now. I think it's probably something that hopefully within 5 to 7 years of consistent growth, if we experience that, we should start to really think about what does that time horizon look like for 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021 type of services. But I think we've got, just from a ratepayer perspective, we've got room to grow within our existing infrastructure right now for a while before we would really start to feel a pinch.
Okay, very good. Further questions or comments? Ms. Mobian?
I did read the Beacon Journal yesterday, so I did review that. So let me ask you this. The average home that you're proposing is $206,000? Is that correct?
I believe that the average comes out to that. They're starting in the high 160s, 170s, and going into the mid 200s. So if you took an average, that would be it. The homes are priced with a basic package, just like you buy your car. Oftentimes people will spend the money where they decide they want it. Either they want granite countertops, or they want nicer carpet, that kind of stuff, and that tends to take the price up. And that's pretty typical for a new home.
Now, these homes are being built on the same side of the Saperstein Towers.
That is
same
correct.
side of Diagonal? Is it across the street?
I'm sorry.
Across Diagonal.
Okay.
Kind of catty corner across.
Okay, your diagram gave me the impression it was on the same side. I thought it was across the street between that church and those big houses.
Right.
Reverend Brown's church.
Right, that's correct.
Your first phase, you said, is how many houses?
It's the 7 that front onto Diagonal Road, and then the second phase will be doing all of that work while they're working on the homes.
And you're going to put the management pond or whatever in the back first?
It's actually in the front, and yeah, that's...
In the front?
Yep, it's in the right-hand front as you're facing the lot, because that's the way the land slopes, and we want to take the water in that direction.
Okay. So that'll be in the front on Diagonal?
Yes.
I see. And you plan to put shrubberies and all that around it?
Yes, ma'am.
To make it look nice. Let me ask you this. So the first phase is how many homes?
Seven. And please don't make me do the math, I'm nervous.
Don't worry about it. My math is probably no better than yours. So if you don't sell those 7 right away, you're not going to continue to build, or you're just going to continue to build?
Well, our intention is to put the improvements in, and I guess it's a little bit of a leap of faith for us, but we're very confident in the marketplace, so markets come and go, but I think part of the reason to build them out front is so that they're not hidden. People can see them, they can go by. If you go by Schumacher's model home, you can see it coming and going every day, and gee, I'd rather live over here myself. So.
No, I don't have a problem listening to the rationale for this at all, but I did read the concerns that were expressed by the neighbors about having these vacant new homes in their neighborhoods and raising the price of their homes. It would increase the value, therefore would increase their taxes as well. I look at the 2 developments on Vernon Odom, the Rulac and the Blake, and those homes still look very nice from the street. I haven't driven in those areas lately, but they still look very nice. And I don't know how many they have there. But 51 sounds like a lot in that area, but again, I'm not a person that can tell you about space and how you utilize it. So you're confident that you're going to be able to sell these homes. You're going to try to sell them in the phases that you develop them, and just go to the second phase if you don't sell them all in the second. I'm just curious about having all of these homes there.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. So we're going to start a group of homes.
Okay.
One of them will be the model show home, perhaps 2, and it'll be merchandise so people will, see, touch, and feel, make you want to buy a new home.
Sure.
Explain to them all the advantages of living in Akron, including the 15-year tax abatement. Then we will build the houses as they sell. That's not to say that we won't put forward a couple of speculative units, but we won't come in and build the entire.
Oh, so these are going to be custom built?
All the houses. They're essentially built to order.
Okay.
They're not like buying a custom home, but it's not like we're just going to go build them all. That's not how that works. So demand will drive that. Again, we've worked with the builder before. We've had partnerships with the national builders that build in the suburbs. They tend to do a lot of research, and if they're confident, usually that confidence is paid back by success. And they're looking forward to the opportunity, and so we're all relatively certain that this will succeed. That's not to say that there may not be a slowdown. I mean, if we go to trade war with China, it might slow us down a little bit, but I don't think overall it is a matter of success. It's more a matter of timing.
So are you planning to incorporate this CFI, this new installation at the basement level at least? It's this new, it's the form that we saw where you have the styrofoam and the concrete being poured down in it.
No, we don't.
Is that form of insulation?
No.
Do you have another form of insulation that's going to keep the...
There's a requirement that there's a 1, 2, and 3 family building code in Ohio, and it requires a different, you have to just prove that your overall energy efficiency matches a certain criteria, and there's several different ways to get to that. So oftentimes it's kind of a plug and play depending on how many windows, how many stories, the configuration of the home. It kind of varies from house to house.
Sure. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. If I could offer this, and that is talking to President Somerville, whose ward this lies in, we had talked about possibly taking a trip up north to where the developers have examples of housing sites like this, and so that's going to try to work that out possibly this week. Yes. Ms. Sims, and then Mr. Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really loved basically everything that James already had to offer. I live about a stone's throw away. I walk past there almost daily. I am concerned about the density. 51 houses on that property. I know that property almost like the back of my hand because I go by there so much. So I do have that concern. The other concern, and I don't know how we looked at traffic patterns there with additional 51 houses. It's a very thin road, taking around the corner. How do we plan to address some of the potential traffic issues there? And I'm always concerned about the big G word. We don't talk about it much, but I walk downtown pretty regularly too. It's just right down Maple, and I'm downtown. So I am concerned about, because there's still some distressed housing all around there, but they're right for folks who still desire older house. I live in a house that's 115 years old, if not 120 years old. So so those are some of my concerns. So I'm glad we are planning to take a trip, because I appreciate density too, but 51 houses seemed really dense.
So what you'll see if you accompany us on a trip, we don't have anything that approaches 7 to 8 to the acre as this does. We're in the 30 to 40 a unit, and it fits into the community. In fact, people that live there like being closer to their neighbors. If you're going to walk, you don't have to walk so far to borrow sugar. So a lot of the Akron neighborhoods are already at that density or higher. It's just that you're not used to seeing it, because as you move away from the city, things got less and less and less dense, because at one time that was the trend. So I do appreciate your comments, and I hope you'll be able to accompany us. I think you would find it interesting.
I could weigh in on the traffic issue as well. The traffic engineer has looked at the development, and Diagonal Road has got excess capacity right now, so we don't anticipate that adding 51 homes. And just one word on density, this is 7.72 houses per acre. My neighborhood, 7.5 houses per acre. And I think as Mr. Sanderson said before, I mean, density is kind of in the eye of the beholder. There'll be people who don't want to live at that density, but I think there is demand for people who would as well.
Okay, Sims? That good? Mr. Kilby? Oh, I'm sorry, are you still, did you have? Oh, okay. Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sanderson, where did, you mentioned take a trip to tour somewhere up north. Where, in Lake County, to look at a situation like this?
No, I mean, we can go a lot of places, but we've done some specific developments in Lakewood and in the city of Cleveland, and I think they best demonstrate our work and kind of what we're going for. I mean, if I can add a point of personal preference, we do have some infill lots in the Highland Square area, so some of what you see will be that kind of home, and I think it's important if you have the opportunity to see that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cleveland would be a better comparison than Lakewood for us anyways, but that's good. If you can put together a tour, I wouldn't mind going if I can. Okay, let me ask this. 206,000, is that what you guys are paying for this 6 acres, or is that what?
That is correct.
Of a house? Okay, all right, that's fine. Who is going to pay for the infrastructure, you or the city?
We are.
Good. All right, we're not providing any financing at all whatsoever for you guys?
You're providing the tax abatement.
Oh, yeah, I understand that.
And some relaxation, relaxation of the, some of the subdivision standards.
On the property taxes, but there's no like TIF or anything
no,
like that? Okay, good.
We will pay less for the land if you'd like us to.
No, it's okay. Let me just say this. Overall, I support the goal. It's good. You guys, administration has done a really good job. And we do have to grow our city, somebody told me once a water system was built for a city of 1 million. Back over 100 years ago, we never even got close to that, but we have the capacity to do this. So, all right, thank you very much.
Further questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you very much. And if anyone is interested in terms of taking that trip, let me know, and we'll try to schedule something. Okay, good. We're going to now move on to the balance of the agenda, which I'm going to recommend we take time. and move into the new list of legislation?
We have another public hearing.
Silly
we
me.
do.
We do have another public hearing. I don't know why I was in such a rush. Okay, the third public hearing. I apologize if anyone's here for this third public hearing. It's authorizing conditional use to establish a child daycare center at 348 Pioneer Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Antonucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Danielle Allen is requesting permission to establish a child daycare business center at this location. Child daycare business center is defined as any place in which child care is provided for 10 or more children. This requires conditional use approval. Care would be provided for a maximum of 12 children with a separate room, each for the care of infants, toddlers, and school-aged children. No changes are proposed for the interior or the exterior of the house. Besides the petitioner, 2 part-time assistants would be employed. The rear yard area is fenced in. Petitioner is in the process of obtaining her Type A license and is seeking permission to operate Little Kings and Queens child care at this address, up to the maximum state allowance of 12 children. Although daycare services will be continuously be available, the majority of the services are during the daytime. This Goodyear Heights neighborhood property is well maintained. Providing quality daycare services is beneficial to the entire city. Planning Commission recommends disapproval, while planning staff recommends approval subject to the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request at 348 Pioneer Street? Again, I apologize. It's the...
Hi, I'm Danielle Allen. I'm here requesting approval for my Type A in-home daycare. I've been working in child care since 2003, and I am now trying to move it into my home daycare. It's at Little Kings and Queens, and I live at 348 Pioneer Street in Akron, 44305. I do not have a Type B. It's for 6 kids. I wanted to go for a Type A. It's for 12 kids. The Type B would only allow 6 kids, and 3 of which would be my own kids. So I would like to go for the Type A already. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor? Anyone in favor? Is there anyone wishing to speak against? Anybody against? Anyone? Hearing none? We'll close the public hearing portion. Is there any questions from any committee members or council members at this point? Ms. Mobian.
Is this, I'm trying to read quickly, is this a new facility or
No,
existing that is increasing her numbers?
This is actually in a house.
Yeah.
It's in a residence.
I mean, a new facility, new daycare.
I believe she's going right to the Type A, so this would be new for her, right up to the 12.
But she wasn't providing daycare services
She wasn't providing,
before.
no.
That's what that was my question, I'm sorry. What was the reason for the commission saying no, you know?
I'm sorry.
You said the planning commission disapproved?
Planning Commission, I think their concern was that she's going right to the 12. She wasn't in operation prior to this.
Oh, they think she should take baby steps or something first?
I think that was their concern.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I think from our perspective, I mean, these are really land use issues, and we're looking more at the compatibility of the daycare with the surrounding residences, and that's why the staff still recommended approval.
Yeah, no, I have no problem, I just wanted to understand what the disapproval was about. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, very good. Hearing none, now we'll move on to the new list of legislation. Short of any concerns about the existing list of legislation, we'll move into the new, of which the first one is authorizing the Director of Planning and Urban Development or designee to enter into agreements with local agencies to carry out the Emergency Solutions Grant Program for program year 2018, support the local emergency transitional homeless shelters in order to provide shelter and supportive services to homeless individuals.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Earlier this afternoon, we discussed the consolidated plan and funding for Community Development Block Grant Funds, Home Investment Partnership, and the Emergency Solutions Grant. So before you is legislation for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. We are set to receive about $499,000. We are recommending funding 4 emergency shelters, 2 transitional shelters, and a homeless prevention and rapid rehousing program. These shelters will serve single women, women with children, single-parent families, and 2-parent families. All the funds and proposals have been reviewed by the Continuum of Care as required by HUD. Additionally, this legislation will also allow us to fund the Homeless Management Information System, another HUD mandate that we provide support to our local HMIS system. Summit County, Barberton, and Cuyahoga Falls also support the HMIS system as well. With that, we ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions or comments from anyone? Is the consent agenda okay? Did you have a question? Is there a question over here?
Yeah, we're trying to figure out. It's not, is it on the iPad?
It's on the new legislation. Is it on the iPad, Mr. Clerk? I don't have it in front of me. Hit refresh if it isn't.
Is this the one that just came in late? We haven't gotten copies of that.
I don't.
either.
It was submitted a couple weeks ago.
It should be on your iPad.
There's a new one too that, do you see it? All right, you show me.
It's under planning. It's right there. That's it. Yeah. And then you hit that one. Techie guy here. It's there. It's there. All right. See, make sure. Is consent agenda okay on this?
Yes, it is.
Okay. This is $499,000 for the Emergency Solutions Grant Program that we had discussed previously. Oops, that's the wrong one. Okay. Is there further questions or comments? Consent agenda is okay. We could place. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of consent agenda signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. Number 2 is ordinance approving the sale of city-owned land located at 630 and 642 diagonal to B.R. Kinez Construction Incorporated in order to promote new housing construction in keeping with Mayor Horrigan's planning to grow Akron strategy for increasing the city's population, revitalizing its neighborhoods.
Yes, this is the ordinance to authorize and approve the sale of that land for the crossings at Ald Farm Development that we talked about earlier.
Yes, sir. What's the value, sir?
$206,000.
206. How many acres?
6.6 acres.
Okay, very good. Further questions or comments on this particular item? Yeah, except for this, for the sale of that land. And we can refer this item. Okay. Is there a second to refer? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. 3 is approving the sale of certain vacant city-owned properties pursuant to the Lot for a Little program in order to facilitate the productive reuse of the property and reducing the cost to the city and taxpayers in maintaining vacant lots.
Yeah, we're asking to actually refer this at this point.
Okay. Is there a motion to refer? All in favor signify by saying aye. You guys have it. Anything else to come before the planning committee? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay, the next committee will be Public Service. Public Service. Keith Kamer.
So I won't be up here, sorry.
Madam Chair, are you ready to roll? Ready to roll? Let's go.
I'd like to call the Public Service Committee to order.
Where is Mr. Fusco?
We're just missing Mr. Fusco right now. Everybody, oh!
Who we missing?
I'm just missing Mr. Hoke, but he's right here. Okay. Clean. That's okay. I knew I was missing somebody. It obviously wasn't Mr. Fusco. May I have approval on the minutes from our previous meeting? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, our minutes have passed. On our old agenda, would you like continued time, on our old piece that we have in front of us?
Yes.
Okay. We will be going on recess here, so I would imagine this would probably be our last week of taking time on it. Would that be
yes.
your recommendation?
Yes.
So if you haven't gotten any questions or concerns in to John Moore or Chris Lettle about that piece that we've had, please do so so that we could get those answered, and that we'd be looking at next Monday in committee, moving this out of committee.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to point out, sorry.
Yes, please.
On this particular piece, what's going on right now is we're sort of fielding questions and issues from folks in the industry and also our industry partners in the city, First Energy, things like that. Obviously, this is a comprehensive regulation to them, and so they're working through issues, getting us feedback, and we're trying to work through that with them. So what I would anticipate happening is probably no later than the 23rd, having a substitute offered as an amendment before you all to take a look at to vote on.
Okay.
We would still be asking that council take a look at that to pass it on an emergency basis because of certain deadlines that the state has imposed. So, but that's kind of the timeline and the constraints.
So we're letting them digest it, chew it and digest it,
yes,
and get back
to the extent that they make some pointed argument or something that potentially needs to change, then potentially making those changes, getting those to you as well.
Okay. Thank you, Brian, very much for that information. So it looks to me like it's right now we're just waiting to make sure that we have it complete and as concise as possible before we move it out of committee. So thank you. But in the meantime, however, if you, once again, we've had this on for a little bit of time, maybe you've forgotten about it. If so, it is a large piece to review. And it takes some knowledge of some of the terminology and things in there to take a look at it. So if there are questions or concerns, please let Chris Little or John Moore know. Okay, I think that's it then. And now we will go to our first piece on public service for new, which is authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee, without the formality of publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract with E&S Supply for the emergency repair of the Thurmont Road storm outlet and declaring an emergency. Mr. Lettle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This was one of our storm outlets between 2515 and 2523. Thurmont?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a repair we made. There was an erosion in the ravine.
Right.
So we did kind of a non-invasive repair, so because of the houses in the close proximity, without bringing in big equipment and removing a bunch of trees. So we added some green infrastructure to manage the storm and repaired the ravine, and also repaired the yards between the houses.
And I want to thank you because that's right up the corner from me. So I'm in yelling distance from this house. And I want to thank the city. When I went out, it looked like a problem. When the engineers went out, and I'm not an engineer, so I didn't say too much, they confirmed it was an issue. And so I want to thank the action that you took. Also, it kind of was a green action, too. You tried to melt in a few things that, and what we're trying to blend in, not always concrete, and not always these things are happening. So I want to thank you. The residents, I've touched base with them, and with the explanation and letting them know just the good communication that the city did on this. So this project has already been done. Okay, so as an emergency,
yes,
it was done. So are there any comments or questions from the committee? Hearing and seeing none, are there any from council members? Councilwoman Amobian.
I too would like to thank you for this work, and I'd like to have my name added to this, please.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And clerk, you got that to add the name? Okay. What is your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Okay. Do I have a motion for consent?
Consent.
Consent. And do I have a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this one passes. Okay. Our second piece today is an ordinance declaring the necessity of and determining to proceed with the improvement of Cole Avenue extension in the city by paving, grading, constructing, reconstructing, and installing curbs, concrete sidewalks, storm sewers, and storm sewer laterals, sanitary sewer laterals, water main and water main laterals, all together with the necessary appurtenances thereto, all in accordance with the petition submitted by the property owner of the benefited property and declaring an emergency. Mr. Love?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and members of the committee. This allows us to develop 16 acres down there at the Firestone Park area, and this is to build the project and put all the infrastructure in.
Thank you. Are there any questions or concerns from the committee? I'm going to imagine we've had issues over there. Some or none at all? None at all? No.
Not real issues.
Okay, all righty. I apologize. I think I went into another ward. Sorry. Okay, any comments or concerns from other members of council? Hearing and seeing none, what is your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Okay. A motion for consent?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, and I have one abstention. One abstention.
Okay.
This would be placed on the consent agenda. Number 6 is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service, after publicly advertising for bids through the Office of Purchasing Agent, to enter into a contract or contracts for the construction of improvements for the Safe Routes to School program and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. This is our Safe Route to School program, where we do striping and we do all the the crosswalks at the schools. And also this is going to include a road diet of Exchange Street from Fountain to Arlington. And also it will be a road diet on Wilbeth from 77 to Arlington.
Mr. Little, does this include all of our school crossings or just the ones that were noted in the legislation?
Just the ones noted in the legislation.
And we're assuming that the other ones are still in good condition, correct?
Or we have them in this year's program, well, which would be next year's.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Any questions or concerns from the committee? Any questions from other council members?
Consent's fine.
Consent? Second, please. Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. And we had another one added. If you didn't reload your tablet, you may not see it. It's 6A. It's ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract without the formality of advertising for bids with the Akron Legal News for the advertisement, placement of legal notices associated with the City of Akron street lighting and cleaning assessments and declaring an emergency. Mr. Moore?
I was just going to say, this is our annual thing. We have to advertise for our street improvement program, street lighting, and this allows us to use the Akron Legal News to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any questions? Councilwoman Samples.
A question for you. If we're spending $15,000 over at Akron Legal News, how much are we spending at the Beacon Journal?
I would have to talk to the purchasing agent, but I would imagine it's a bit more than that.
Right there, Mr. Moore.
Oh, Kim, please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have to state the legals twice. So in order to save money, we have been trying to go through Akron Legal News and Akron Beacon Journal. Akron Beacon Journal is probably about 10–15% more than Akron Legal News.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to say hi. Councilman Kamer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question is this driven from the charter or city ordinance that we have to advertise? We got like 10 people.
It's state law that we have to advertise the legals.
Okay. But I mean, does it specify how we advertise? And it does say in publications?
Publication of record.
Okay.
General circulation. We also put it out in other areas, but legally we have to put it in one of those two. Our general circulation instead of recognized. It's antiquated, and trust me, working on state law change so we can do it free practically.
Right.
It's harder to change state law.
Well, I was just thinking, moving forward with technology, our website, the city council website, social media, you know, we might be able to save money.
To the site after that, but you know, who has access to it? Believe me, Akron Legal News, the circulation isn't huge, but it's a paper of general circulation.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. King. Anyone else? Hearing and seeing consent?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion for consent? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. Okay, is there anything else to come before this committee? If not, we are adjourned, but we're still not on time. We're not on time, but we're adjourned. We have safety.
Okay, next we're going to have public safety.
Yeah.
You just announced, folks.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move forward with our public safety meeting to order. We do have minutes to approve from last week. Can I get approval of those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All right, we have one new piece in front of us today. We have authorizing the mayor or his designee without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into contracts with Burgess Ambulance Sales Incorporated to provide for the refurbishment of one emergency medical unit and declare an emergency. We have Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Charlie Brown with us.
And thank you, Councilperson Kamer. Brought with me
District Chief Cowett, who's going to talk about this refurbishment.
All right, Chief.
Good afternoon.
Move forward, there you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. Yeah, we are looking to, the main reason we're here is to not enter into a formal bid process and award the service to Burgess Ambulance. The main reason we want Burgess to do this work for us is they are the company that built the original med unit, which is a 2009, and we feel that we will get the best service and the best product by using the original manufacturer.
All right.
So if you have any other questions about the remount process or why we chose to do this, I'd be happy to answer those.
All right, thanks, Chief. Any questions, committee members? Mr. Hoke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was wondering, at one point in time, I think we spoke about refurbishing med units, and that we had pretty much refurbished all of them, and that we wouldn't be able to do that anymore. But
yeah,
but this one's coming in.
We only refurbish them once, and refurbish consists of taking the box off and putting it on a new chassis. And then that box basically gets 2 life cycles. So we only do one refurbish, and there was a point where we didn't have any med units that were available for a initial refurbish. We recently had a unit that was relegated to our reserve status due to the purchase of a new med unit last year, and the engine blew on that. So we had the choice of spending $17,000 for a new engine, or we could refurbish this unit and use some of our capital budget to turn this spare into basically a new unit. So this will become a frontline unit. So we didn't have any units at the time until that engine blew. We weren't considering doing a refurbishment on that unit until the engine blew, and the box was in very good shape. So between our shop foreman and our leadership staff, we felt that it was a good option to refurbish that unit.
Okay, so we're basically just taking the box and putting it on a new chassis?
That's exactly right, yeah. And it'll be a brand new chassis, brand new cab, but we're taking the box off, which is in very good shape. It's been inspected, and we feel that it's worthy to, and it still has a lot of life left. So we can transfer that to a new chassis, and it basically will be considered a new unit, and it will become one of our frontline units.
Okay.
And a new unit is about upwards of $160,000, and this refurbishment costs about $97,000. So there's a savings there of close to $60,000 in refurbishment, plus avoiding purchasing a new engine. So we're looking at savings of between $75,000 and $80,000.
Okay. And the life expectancy then would be?
It'll be the same as a new unit, because it's basically new, except for the box, but the box during this process will be refurbished. It'll be remounted, and the box will be refurbished, all new wiring, all new ventilation equipment. So the box will not just be picked up and put on, it will be refurbished itself.
Okay.
So it will be, and we've had success in the past with refurbishments, and are confident that this box will be able to make it to another life cycle. So we look to get another 7 to 10 years out of this med unit.
Okay. All right, Chief. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments from anyone, committee members? With that, what's the pleasure on this one? Consent agenda, okay?
I would like to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend the rules.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, we'll suspend the rules this evening, and with that, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have rules.
I'd like to call the Rules Committee to order, please.
Okay.
First order of business is to approve our minutes from our previous meeting. I have a motion. Second. Thank you. I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes pass. Okay. We have two things on our old agenda that we will remain on time. And we'll go into our new legislation. This is an ordinance authorizing and directing the submission to the electors of the City of Akron, a proposal to amend Section 4 of the Charter of the City of Akron to establish a May primary election date for municipal elections in the City of Akron. In order to reduce the cost of the primary election for Akron taxpayers and uphold the voting rights of military service members, to be voted upon at the next regular citywide election on November the 6th, 2018, and declaring an emergency. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As I explained to almost all of you last week in the meeting, we had been talking about this proposal for a while and better ways to save money, but also increase capacity and also increase turnout. We talked about changing the primary date. Many communities across Summit County, in fact probably the bulk of our population, have joined together, do have a September primary, and also see similar entities as you know, if we're all on September primaries and where you see turnout is, and I'd say except for maybe once in the last 20 years, it's maybe cracked in the double digits or maybe around 12 or 15. The other part that really was driven, this is what the Board of Elections kind of brought to us, is that you know, they have a significant issue when it comes to, you know, fulfilling their obligation for overseas military ballots, is that they have to send out 2 different primaries. And I think we have laid out those arguments, and eventually, this goes back to whether it was 1951, we were, and I know nobody has been around that long to know the reason and why they eventually moved it from September, or used to be a May primary, back to September. But it also, part of the argument back then was it put a lot of pressure on the Board of Elections to be able to fulfill its duty, and that was, you know, 60 some odd years ago to be able to do that. We feel by all of these communities moving back to a May primary, we'll achieve those things. It will save us money. It will help the Board of Elections fulfill their obligations, and it will increase turnout. And for that, we'd like, and this ultimately is for the voters to decide. That's all we're asking City Council to do, is let the voters decide when they would like to have their primary, and then we abide by what the voters say. Anything to add?
Mayor, would you also tell us, I know it was in a press release and there was a nice article about it, the other communities that are joining us on this, because I think
yeah,
this
was
is,
remiss.
I think that's real pertinent in the fact that when respectfully...
Right, there are 6 other communities,
right.
City of the Talmadge, Green, Cauga Falls, New Franklin, and Barberton. And this one?
Norton has also introduced legislation.
Legislation to be able to do that, and their respective councils will take a look at it and then decide whether to put that before their voters too. And the interesting thing is that, you know, if all the other communities move and we stay, then it becomes that much more expensive for us to be able to have that election too. Not everything is driven by cost, but when you share those costs with other communities, I think it's prudent on our part to be able to do that as best as possible and still provide that access, and May does that with the primary.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that is every chartered community in Summit County that has a September primary. So every community that has a September primary is considering moving it to May.
And that's important, so thanks for adding that. Okay, and with the knowledge that if we didn't at least ask our voters, no matter what they say, if we are the only one doing it, it is going to be more costly. So this is, I think this is a good marriage between a number of communities coming together and saying how we can work together to maybe improve our situations. Okay, I'm going to open up to the committee. Any questions? Councilwoman Mobian?
If we approve this, and is there a certain percentage that Akron has to pay for any election that is held in which there's something in Akron that's on the ballot? Is there a percentage?
Go ahead.
So we only pay if it's an Akron issue, so like a charter amendment, which could be either something like this or something that if people submit petitions, or a local candidate, so mayor or city council. So just because it's happening in the city of Akron, like if it's a tax levy for, say, the library pays. We don't pay from municipal funds. So we only pay if it's a municipal election.
We don't pay anything.
Correct. And then when we do pay, we pay a per precinct cost, which is split evenly between all the precincts that have issues or candidates, if that makes sense.
Do we know how much that would be?
It varies each election because, again, their costs vary and also who it's being spread amongst varies. So that's why if we were the only community that was having an election on our own, we would pay everything, right? So we're paying more than just our share of overhead. We're paying essentially to put the whole election on, and that tends to be significantly more costly, which is why moving it to May will reduce that cost, because there tend to be many more communities who have issues in May, and there are sometimes statewide issues in May as well.
I think the City of Challenge Mayor kind of highlighted a special issue that he has with a precinct in Brimfield that he had to pay $4,000 for 3 people to show up and vote, which I don't think anybody wanted to set up a system to that end to be able to spend that amount of money. They have to, because they have to have an election and they have voters in that particular precinct that actually live outside of their taxing district.
And we do have, Councilwoman Amobian, we have specific per precinct charge data from going back several elections, and we can share that with you if that would help you.
Any other questions from committee? No? Okay. Any questions from council members? Councilman Kilby, and then...
Okay. It's not really a question. It's a statement. The ballot language, in my opinion, the first part is pretty straight up, put to the voters, should we change the date? And then the last part, it says reduce the cost of the primary election and uphold the voting rights of military service members. Those are the reasons why we do that, or why you guys are proposing to do this. Now, I think ballot language should be straight up, not contain the reasons. If you want to run a campaign in favor of this, then you raise these things. If the newspaper wants to editorialize about the reasons the voters should support this, then they can do that. But I feel very strongly ballot language should not contain a sales pitch. And I think this last clause of this ballot language is a sales pitch. So I would wish the committee would amend that ballot language right now and take out that last clause.
Well, and even in our conversations, I sat there and kind of thought about, what the ballot language should be, but to me, it's part of the argument to do it, and I think that's why it should be part of the ballot language. I mean, I think we'll disagree on that particular part of it, but not everybody is going to maybe see a campaign flyer or see an ad or see something on there. I think they deserve to know what the issue is. If there's a counter argument to it, it's part of the argument. You call it a sales pitch. I call it the 3 great reasons to change your primary day.
Okay, should we put vote for Dan Horrigan because he's a good mayor when you run for re-election next year?
Well, to me, this is the least about politics and more about what's convenient for voters as opposed to ourselves.
Very clearly,
that's totally outside what the argument is. The ballot language should read the reasons of why we want to change it. And if somebody else has a counter argument to it, they certainly can propose that.
I disagree completely, Mayor.
Okay, and we will disagree. We've done that in the past. And
I think as council, we approve the ballot language. I think I'm going to ask every one of you guys to think about it. And, if we put this on the ballot, it'll probably pass anyways, especially
Is that an
Runs
endorsement?
affirmative campaign. This does not belong in the ballot language. That's how we got 4-year terms. Everybody benefits from that, I guess. I opposed it. I was the only ward councilman that opposed it and fought it. Because that was even more blatant. It says, in order to save money. And that had been turned down a number of times by the voters when it was 4-year terms, when it was put to the voters straight up. And then they got smart, put a sales pitch in it, and it passed. Now, this is the same thing, a little less blatant, but the reasons for this belong in the campaign and the editorials and letters to the editor, not in the ballot language. Now think about that.
Thank you, Councilman Kilby. I'm going to go to Councilman Kamer, and then I have behind you, and then
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I know earlier you spoke, I think, in 1951, the election was in September, or it was in May, and then it moved to September. Can you give that history again, why it was moved?
The reason why, I wasn't there with the argument, I really don't know. I mean, with a little bit of the, I just know that it changed. And there was a little bit in that there was a fear that the Board of Elections for the general election would not have enough time to prepare with the September primary. That was part of council's argument back then.
Okay.
And because it used to be in May, that's all that I have in digging through those particular things. And so it's a valid argument now, it was a valid argument then.
No, I just wanted to know so I can give that history of
That's what I know so far.
why it was in May before, then it was changed back to September, or changed to September. One more, I support this 100%. I'm on board for the May primary. I'm excited about it. I will tell my residents to go out and vote for this, but I do kind of concur with Mr. Kilby in regards to my only concern is the last sentence, and uphold the voting rights of military service members. That basically takes away the voting rights of every individual that has the right to vote. If you suffer from any kind of illnesses, handicap, that first person that just turned 18 that registered to vote, that's how I'm looking at it. I look at it that we're just focusing on the military. So that's my input in regards to that. So that is something that I like the rest of it, even reduce the cost of primary election. But if I was an average voter and my daughter, she just turned 18 this year and she's registered to vote, and it's going to be her first time to come out and vote. And when I read this, I just look at it like it's all about the military. So that's that. Thanks. Thank you.
thank you. Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, my concerns are like what I shared with you. As an incumbent, this benefits everybody that's on council. There is no way someone can run a campaign, an effective campaign, if you're going door to door with a May primary. This benefits those of us that have a seat. I can only think of when I first ran, didn't have the money to send out multiple mailers to people's homes. It was walking door to door to door. To be able to get, one, to be able to get my message out, but then to be able to really understand the needs of the constituents. And, you know, I cringe every time I hear us say something about saving money. It's no secret, the fire hydrant issue, and people smirk and laugh about that. But that's $155,000 a year easily that we're spending that we don't have to spend. So the thing about saving money, let's take that out. This is not about saving money. Because if it is, we would be conscientious about everything that we do.
I can guarantee you that I am conscientious about spending every dollar. Those two issues are so highly unrelated.
No, sir.
Yes,
No,
and they are, and that's okay, and we'll
Excuse
disagree on that
me.
part of it.
We're talking
That's
about
okay.
money is money. Money is money. Unless we've got a separate fund, it all comes out of the city's budget. And for us not to, when it's been noted how we can save money in one area and we don't, you're talking about $150-something thousand a year easily. that we could save. So it's not about saving money. And as I shared with you when we spoke, I'm thinking about those people who are going to want to run after I run, or who will want to run against me or against any of us.
See, we didn't craft this with us in mind. We crafted it with the voters in mind. And I think as we designed the system, it's more about the customers than us.
I'm thinking of the voters when I say that.
Okay.
Because when I speak, I represent my voters. And if at any time, as they know, that I misspeak on their behalf, they let me know. I am thinking about my voters. You know, we talk about, and we've had this discussion here, about, you know, providing inclusiveness, making the process equitable. This is another example. I mean, when this discussion was made, maybe some of my colleagues on council were a part of that discussion, but the folks who are going to be impacted, the folks who we represent who are going to be impacted should have been a part of that discussion.
They get to go to the polls and make the decision, which is the ultimate democratic process.
Well, this is my thing, and this is why I'm going to vote against it. My folks made the decision when they voted for me last time to speak on their behalf on issues like this. Do they always agree with the things that I vote on? No, but then it's for me to explain why I voted as I voted. On this one right here, for voters to be able to have the diversity on this council that we have, so that money is not the driving force that runs a campaign, folks need to be able to go door to door. You cannot do that with a May primary.
I can tell you that I've gone door to door in the winter months, countywide and citywide, so I would take exception to the fact that you can't go door to door in those months.
Mayor,
you can, and it's worked for other people. This is the argument that we would like City Council to do. You can either put it on the ballot or it becomes more expensive for us to be able to do it. That's all we're asking is for let the voters decide of whether they would want a September or a May primary.
Well, I tell you,
I appreciate you, I really do.
This is my concern. Knowing how, I mean, even the article that came out in the Beacon Journal speaking to it, I mean, that was a press release, you know, publicizing this piece. If we're going to, as you speak about, if we're going to put on the arguments why we should have it, well then put in there if you're going to put the pros, put the potential cons in there on the ballot language so that people can understand. This right here is not in the best interest
I would disagree, that's all. I think it is in their best interest, and they get to vote on it, which I think is the ultimate decider. That's the democratic process.
Please do not try to sell them on a cost savings. Please do not
Why?
try
It
to
is a
use
cost
that.
savings, though. I mean, I'm going to promote those arguments because they're true. I'm not going to tell them something that's not true. Just like the four-year terms was saving money, it did.
It's hypocritical, though.
It's not. Not on my end.
It's hypocritical when we could save them $155,000 a year easily, and we choose to spend that. I'm not going to, the administration has chosen to say, even going back on a promise to this council to create an opportunity for citizens to be able to do that. So, I mean, and there's other areas where we can save money that we don't save money. This right here, it creates an advantage for those of us who sit on council. For anyone that wants to run against us, it makes it difficult for them to run a campaign in the winter months, which ends up impacting the citizens of Akron because you don't have the potential diversity on council to bring balance. So, you know, my concern is that as presented, one, I think it's a misrepresentation. And then two, just understanding what it takes to be able to really reach the constituents and get the message out. This would make it easier for those. And we've had people come down here and tell us, oh, we give money to campaigns. We influence campaigns. You move this to May, that money speaks louder. You leave it in September on a ward race, every person, regardless of their income, if they're running, they have the equal access to be able to go door to door and speak to their constituents and get their message out. Move it to May, they don't have that opportunity.
Councilman Fusco.
Thank you. Listening to everyone's points of view here, and I respect everyone's thoughts. Some of the historical, I know Mr. King was asking about that. The last 8 or 10 years, what's happened is that the state has moved to open up the process of voting. It used to be back in the old days, us older ones will remember, that you had to be sick or out of town or unavailable to vote. Now they've made it to where they've extended the time frame, because it used to be like 10 days or something for absentees, and now we call it early voting. That has evolved and changed over the last 8 to 10 years. That is why we have somewhat of a problem, because now I believe it's 45 days. And so what happens is the Board of Elections, they have 10 days through state mandate that they certify an election. After 10 days, they certify the election, okay? Then 45 days beforehand, what happens is the ballots go out for the November election. So they are in violation of federal law. If you go and ask them that question, they will tell you that answer. There are 85 counties out there that don't have September primaries. Okay, there's only 3 counties in the state of Ohio that have September primaries. And there's good reason for that. One of those reasons are, in fact, that violation of state law, that they've got to, what we have to do, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that those people, that their votes are counted and that there's no redundancies. Because what happens is after 10 days, they count the votes, and sometimes, as many of us know, those votes, those elections can be extremely close. So there's a recount. So then there's so many days, so then all those laws kick in after that. So then there's a recount. So they mail out a ballot to those early voters that request it, and there's been times where they've had to remail that ballot because of those close elections. The door-to-door thing, like you, Mayor, I've worked on a lot of campaigns over my time, and I've spent time out there going door to door, helping out, especially state representative candidates and so on and so forth. And it's a little cooler out there, but it can certainly be done. And in terms of the ballot language itself, I understand the points that were made, but everything within that is factual. Everything is factual and can be proven, and it's all factual information. So my piece of this is, and what I'm saying is after having done some research, talked to a lot of folks over the last several months, is that let's let the voters decide what they would like to see. Would they like to see a September primary or a May primary? At the end of the day, it should be up to them.
Thank you, Mr. Fusco. Ms. Sims?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does anybody know how many ballots we're talking about overseas for the military?
I don't know a specific number. My understanding was in like the most recent election, they issued, I want to say, like between 30 and 40 of these ballots to either overseas military or people who got UOCAVA ballots, and I think about 29 or 30 of them had to be duplicated in the most recent election.
Yes. Yeah. So my understanding is that it was 29. So let me follow the process. So after an election, you have the 10 days to certify. They immediately, primary.
They can't certify until the 11th day. They have 21 days to certify.
We send out the initial ballot, and then there's an amended ballot depending on if there's a runoff or something happens.
So I'm speaking for the Board of Elections, which I'll let them speak for themselves, but yes, if that request for what they call a UOCAVA ballot has come in by the 45th day, they send them over immediately, so on that 45th day before the general, and then they have to send a second ballot once primary election results have been certified to anyone who got the first ballot.
So technically, we're saying 29 people
got 2 ballots in the most recent.
So we would have been in violation because of the 29 people. Is that
right? We would have been in violation because of one person, or even if no one had requested it, we're in violation just because of the timeline.
So do you know how many ballots we actually through whatever reasons, had to throw out in November 2015?
You'd have to ask the Board of Elections. I think you have, actually. My understanding is you asked them at that already.
I'm asking you, do you know?
No, I don't work for the Board of Elections. No.
So I too agree with Councilman Kilby. Not that I don't think that our men and women, I think anybody who has the right to vote should have the opportunity to do that. But I do see the latter portion of the ballot language as a sales pitch. And unlike, I know I'm probably the last one that should be saying, I would concur with Councilman Neal. For me, even as I do door-to-door, I actually really enjoy it, but I see the challenges of someone who desires, and I think that's part of the democratic process too, to represent your government if you desire to do that. When I look at the window between February and May, that is an extremely small window, and it's very hard to overcome. I know we can say, and it's hard to raise money. It's hard to raise money as a new candidate who don't have, you know, the incumbency on their side, and so no one's giving me any money January until we
Akron also has the most restrictive campaign finance limits in the state, and I think one of the most in the country, so that also probably impacts raising money.
No, some people do really, really well, and they're able to direct mail, and so you don't have the issue of having to do door-to-door. I see it as partly a challenge for people who would want to run too. I too, in my head said, you know, I'm going to let the people decide. But over the weekend, which kind of prompted a lot of the initial inquiries about the number of folks who we were sending ballots overseas to, they didn't understand. They didn't understand why we were moving it to May. So I think part of our job is to do the best we can to vet the language when it comes through here. And so, thank you.
Any other? Councilman Kilby.
There's been a lot of good conversation on this. I mean, I respect both sides. I think I would ask the committee to maybe take a week's time, get somebody from the Board of Elections here to answer some questions. I know there's a deadline to get something on the ballot in November, and I don't think we're close to that yet, at the end of this month. Would it be a problem taking a week's time?
I believe that that's what the committee would like to make a motion of. That is perfectly fine. Yeah.
And I would ask the committee or the administration to get somebody from the Board of Elections and be prepared to answer some questions like exactly how many in the last round of municipal elections with the September primary, how many overseas ballots were impacted, and whether or not, and we all know this is a one-party town. Whoever wins the Democratic primary for all these seats and the mayor's seats is most assuredly going to be your mayor or your council people. So I'd like to know how that would impact an election anyways. And I understand people have a right to vote, but, and let me just say one other thing. Ellen, you came up with this 1951 when the charter was changed. I don't know. I think if you went back further, it would have been a September primary, because let me just say this. I don't know if you went back any further. Just anecdotally, when I first ran for city council in 1993, I remember having a conversation with an old guy in Goodyear Heights that says, well, my father ran for council back during the Depression, and he walked all summer. So I'm thinking maybe they did it in September, and then they changed it to May, and then they changed it back to September for some reason. I don't know if you have the history of that.
I think it was the original charter language for the primary adopted the state primary, which was in May. My understanding was something passed in the General Assembly that enabled chartered communities to choose a different primary date, and soon after that, Akron proposed moving it to September. So he was probably talking about the general election, like you said. There was a time when the general election was...
The Depression was in 1930, so he said the Depression, so you know, this is just anecdotal. Let me just tell you.
I'm just saying what
I think it was probably
charter said.
in the 30s. It was a September primary, because I don't know why anybody would be walking. Maybe. Yeah, I guess you're right, Mayor. You're right. There was competitive elections during that. There was more Republicans around. You're right. It could be true.
Thank you.
Councilman
Swirsky.
Yeah, one quick question about the voter turnout increase. Do you have some numbers with that? A 46% increase of the number of people who would be involved in the city election. Is that accurate?
That's based on looking back at the last 4 municipal primary years. So when Akron had something on the ballot, the September turnout and the May turnout in those elections. I can get, the Board of Elections provided all that data. We can provide that to you guys as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting
that's just on
part of this debate. Is, are we actually creating an election that serves and involves more people by moving it to May? And
even anecdotally, if you look at the data for the last 20 years, historically, primaries in September are abysmal, period. For a lot of different reasons, you know, you can't point, in May, they're historically a lot better. And that's part of the consistency, it's part of the argument to increase turnout to be able to do that. We think May primary is better. Plus, the other 6 communities are trying to do the same thing. So it's just not us saying, you know what, hey, let's just do this by ourselves. All the charter communities in the city, in the county are moving to that, or want their voters to have the decision to say, should we do May or September?
And again, I think some of that goes to the fact that the state primary in other years is in May. There's almost always something on the May election. I think people are just used to voting in May. Again, Akron is kind of unique in that we do also have a September primary, but people tend to know that May is primary season.
Are there any more questions? Councilwoman Amobian.
So the elections we've had in August have been special elections?
Yeah, I don't know of the last August election in Akron, but they're special elections.
We've had them, I know, because we tried to put school board issues on.
Correct, yes. No, there's an August special election for other issues. I don't know that any Akron charter amendment or issue has been on an August election.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, Councilman Hoke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank you for this, and that I am in support of the option to put this charter amendment on the ballot and leave it up to the voters. I appreciate looking into reducing costs at every level and reducing costs with knowledge and doing it in a sense that we're doing it the right way, and not just because we're going to think we're going to, save some money in some manner, like fire hydrants. But reducing the cost of the primary election, being a veteran and being the only veteran on council, I appreciate looking out for the voting rights of the military and making it easier for the military to make sure that if they do decide to vote, that their ballots can get into their hands and back into the Board of Elections in a timely manner and be counted with everybody else, because as I think in the meeting that we had last week, that it was mentioned that a lot of the ballots either don't get here in time and may not even get counted. And I think that's a disservice to our military people. And I think it's a disservice to anybody saying that, you know, why would we put this on the ballot? That, you know, we're trying to uphold the voting rights of our military personnel. And I take exception to that statement, being a military veteran. And I think that you know, there was a statement made about being against a 4-year term, and I didn't want, you know, voted against it. Didn't stop anybody from running again. So, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get this taken care of shortly. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to make a statement. There's a lot of talk about, well, this is put on the ballot, let the voters decide. Well, we're elected, and it's our obligation to approve this or not approve it. It's our obligation to look at the ballot language, see if it's fair, and, you know, like, we're the experts in elections. Everyone around here has won a few elections. They wouldn't be here. And it's up to us to decide whether we want to put this on the ballot, not to just pass the buck and say, hey, let the voters decide. You know, we shouldn't allow the voters, okay, to decide something that we don't think is right. We shouldn't give them that choice. So somebody could spend a lot of money running a campaign to influence them to vote for something that we don't think is in their best interest. And especially when there's ballot language that is influencing them one way or the other. So again, I think the ballot language, this should be taken out. If you want to raise those issues about veterans voting or saving money, that's fine, but not in the ballot language is my point. It should be done with a campaign. And that's, you know, let's get the Board of Elections down here, answer some of these questions that have been raised, and I'd like to know, okay, when have they never been able to send out the absentee ballots after a September primary in time? How many times has that happened? In their opinion, has it ever influenced the outcome of a general election? And as far as the money is minuscule. I know even if we're the only one left, I'd like to know how much that's going to cost. And even if it's, I mean, what's the value in money of democracy? I mean, how much are we willing to spend for democracy is the question. And save a little bit of money, in the scheme of things, it's not much. Like $85,000 every 4 years or whatever it is, works out to about $20,000 a year, which is a lot of money to us individuals, but in the scheme of things, when you have a $700 million operating budget, that's not a lot of money. So, Madam Chairman, if you do invite someone from the board, I would like them to be prepared to answer some of these questions, not just to show up and wing it.
Thank you, Councilman Kilby. May I ask you a question? Did you mention that we're in violation right now, how we are doing things? And can you explain that? Because I think that's one of the motivators, is because we are in violation.
Sure. So as it was presented to us, again, this issue was brought to us by the Board of Elections, which prompted the looking into proposing this charter amendment. There's a federal law that's called UOCAVA. It's been mimicked in state law, and the federal law applies to federal elections. The state law applies to state and local elections. And it says that like overseas military or active duty military, even within the United States, so say you're stationed in Hawaii or somewhere, you can request an absentee ballot and still vote in local elections. The Board of Elections has to send those general election ballots out 45 days prior to the general election. So I think the absentee balloting time frame for if you're getting an absentee ballot at your home in Akron is shorter. It's like 30 days. But because they have to travel overseas, there's a lot more involved. They have a 45-day deadline. Again, they cannot legally begin to certify the results of the primary election until the 11th day after the primary. Well, in Akron, those 2 days are the same day. So they have to send out their 45-day general election ballots on the very first day they could possibly certify the primary. So they have to already have them printed. So they have to send out a ballot overseas that is incomplete. It lists only those issues or candidates that didn't have, weren't involved in the primary, so maybe a state issue. They have to send a note that says this is an incomplete ballot. We're sorry, this is the best we can do, essentially, because the local charter has a September primary date. Once the primary date has been certified, the primary election results have been certified, they then send out a second complete ballot. Well, according to the Board of Elections, oftentimes those military service members have already filled out their first incomplete ballot. Now they get a second ballot. A lot of times they're confused. They fill them both out. Then the Board of Elections has to compare those two, make sure they're not double counting anything. It just kind of causes, confusion. And again, that's out of compliance with the law. They're doing the best they can given that time frame.
Thank you, Ellen. And I will ask you to help me contact someone at the Board of Elections, since I think they brought it to you.
Yeah, and I think anyone at the board would be willing to speak with any member of council.
And I think that would be helpful.
We can obviously request that they come, but if they're not available, I know they've made themselves available to answer those questions. I will provide the data they provided to us as far as voter turnout and those precinct costs to council so that you guys can consider that.
And if any questions you think of later, if you would send them to me so that, and you'll see that I'm going to send them out then, okay? Because I think it's very difficult to walk in and know the answers to everything without having, you just don't want to misinform or say something wrong. So I think if any of those questions you have, let's flush them out now. And if you get them to me, I promise you I'll be sending them out so that those people, if we're able to get somebody here, will be able to be prepared. Okay, is there any other comments? Okay, hearing and seeing none. There has been no motion, but there has been a recommendation from someone on council for time, and may I ask what your pleasure would be?
We were going to request time.
Okay.
We were just asking for a vote before the break.
Okay, is there a motion for time? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that will be placed on time. Is there anything else to come before this committee? No, ma'am. Okay, then we are adjourned.